see you in the land of Mordor. Death awaits you at the border. Pass on through the gates of fun. Destroy the ring of power and wonder.
Hey, Middle-earth role-playing fans and Lord of the Rings fans in general, welcome back to the channel. I am Roman Daisel. Today we're going to be looking at Cities of Middle-earth. This is 8301 of the series. This was released in 1988. I think I paid like $25 for it in the store back in the day. Probably from Imperial Hobbies. Can't remember exactly where. And it's the only one of the first that's hardcover. So I was kind of surprised. This was to be their new series, Cities of Middle-earth. Unfortunately, there was only 2 of these books, Minas Tirith and Minas Ithil. They never went beyond that until into the 90s when they re-released a lot of stuff. But anyway, the cover art here is pretty cool by Eggs McBride. It's got Gandalf in front of the Great Gates. You can see the Witch King, Grond, and the forces of Mordor trying to get in. And Gandalf with Shadowfax is there to stop him. And this is where that ends. In the Peter Jackson movie, they actually get inside. And there's a huge battle in the first level, which doesn't happen in the book. Gandalf stops him, dawn breaks, the Rohirrim come, and that's the end of it. That's as far as the Witch King ever got to entering Minas Tirith, was in the gateway. But anyway, let's check out Cities of Middle-earth, Minas Tirith. It does come with a full color map, just like a campaign set. So on one side you get the lands of Belfalis, Dorian, Ernil, as well as Lamadon and Tolfalis, and a little bit of the Harondor coast, which is what I liked. And names a couple of little towns. And on this side it has Harlithlion, Lebanon, Anorian, and Forlithlion, as well as Minas Tirith, Osgiliath, and Minas Ithil, as well as the Morannon up here. So it does give a pretty good map size. Unfortunately, when you do that, you notice right away, right here, that the Anduin coming here does not match with the Anduin coming out here. It's an oversight they made. They didn't make these maps connect. It really sucks. Like the mountains here don't connect with the mountains there. They could have did this a little better, made this more to scale. So that part does suck. Flipping over the other side though, you got a really good representation of the city of Minas Tirith. Tolkien did a fairly decent job describing what's here. You have all 7 levels, and then the top where the main keep, the keep and the government houses are sitting, as well as the Hallows down there, which are in line with the 6th level. And it gives a little cutaway down here. This was a very fortified city. And it gives you an idea of the gatehouse right here. And this color-coded map has locations. So key buildings. So orange are gate complexes, green is residential sites, light green is a field, olive green is a park, black are the walls, gray is a bare rock, gold are commercial establishments, copper is the craftsman, dark blue are inns, lodgings, and entertainment, light blue is water, maroon is important building, undescribed, purple is a financial establishment, and red are key buildings. So there's not much deviation from what Tolkien described and what this looks like. So I was really happy to have the map. It would have been better if it had been a little bit bigger, like a little bit more. You can see more of the Pelennor fields, because that way you could set up a siege with the forces of Mordor. Or they should have had a couple of maps that give you the port of Harland, Osgiliath, the Pelennor fields, and the Ramus Hakor. It would have been really cool. But what can you do? So the map is good, but it has its drawbacks. Nothing on the inside cover. Gotta love the symbol there. Gives you a table of contents, the introductions. There's nothing really different about anything here than any other book. It gives the history of the City of the Sun, Minas Anor, which was its original name. The tale of years. Minas Anor never fell like Minas Ithil. Minas Ithil fell twice. Once to Sauron in the Second Age, during the War of the Last Alliance, and then again to the forces of the Witch King of Angmar in 2002. After a 2-year siege, the city of Minas Ithil fell. It does give another little regional map, a little bit closer, and then talks about the city lands. The Pelennor Field, the Noag Ekor, which is only a dike in the 17th century. So this is always a 1640 time period after the Great Plague, when the forces of Gondor are weak, but so is everybody else. I think it's the middle point where the forces of good and evil are balanced perfectly, and then the side of good starts to decline. Not gradually at first, and then by the War of the Ring, it is in a steep decline, and only a miracle helped them. And this is what I wish they made a major map of. You got the Pelennor Fields, the Noag Ekor, or Ramos Ekor, it's going to be a wall sooner or later. You got Skiliath, you got the Harlond down here. It's too bad in the Peter Jackson movies they never really mentioned this encircling dike, the Noag Ekor, or Ramos Ekor. It would have been nice if they'd done that whole battle scene when Faramir defends Osgiliath, and then back to the Ramos Ekor, and then falling back to Minas Tirith. Oh well, gives you a nice view of the Harlond. You do see the Harlond in the Return of the King movie by Peter Jackson. It's when the black ships, the Corsairs of Umbar, the Black Fleet, comes up and docks at the Harlond. You do see it. And then Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas jump out by themselves, and then they're laughing until the army of the dead appears out of nowhere, which doesn't happen in the book. In the book, those black ships are filled with men from Gondor, from the southern fiefs, and from some freed slaves, because the rowers on the ship were all slaves, mostly men who had been captured in previous raids from Gondor. So it gives a description of the Harlond, the roads, a weather table, a typical farmstead, which you can use. It might have been interesting to see the forces of Gondor use these typical farmsteads as little strong points in which to rally in the Pelennor Fields. They could have been used like that. Kind of like what the Duke of Wellington's strategy was at the Battle of Waterloo. He used 3 great farmhouses. The Hougoumont, I forget the other 2 off the top of my head. One was the Hougoumont. The Hay Saint was another. I forget the third one. But he used those as breakwaters. A small group of men could easily hold out for a long period of time. And it's possible these things could do the same thing. Because when you look at the walls of Minas Tirith, it's great for withstanding a siege by a lesser force, but when you're dealing with Mordor, you think you would have put ravelins and put a ditch around it, especially around the Great Gate. Put a ditch and a bridge that could be rigged to collapse. Things like that. And because Gondor had the technology, after almost 6,000 years, when you count the Númenórean period and the War of the Wrath, the elves, you'd think they'd have the technology to build these things, or at least plan better. That's one of the defensive flaws I found in the whole book, in the whole War of the Ring. How the defense of Osgiliath, the Peter Jackson movies, really botched that one. The Gondorians knew that Mordor was going to come through Osgiliath and also at Caer Andros at 2 locations, but the main brunt was going to come at Osgiliath. They were ready. Anyway, then it goes on to the White Mountains, the Andunan riverbanks. Mentions a shipwrights hall and a warden's hall. Because the Harlond was the port of Minas Tirith. It's kind of like what in Rome had. They had that. Rome was connected to that port on the Mediterranean, and also Athens had their own walls down to their port. It's kind of the same idea. You got local agriculture, fishing, herbalism, rare and special herbs. So this is the flora and fauna. You're not going to find a lot of wild beasts and birds. Only your typical run-of-the-mill field animals. This is really settled area. Wild plants, again, the same idea. Culture and lifestyle. You have your home life, customs, etiquette, and dress. Not going to go into a lot of detail. Food and drink. It goes into a lot of detail of this. This is a Dunedain culture. Most of the inhabitants would be Dunedain, though there would be a large percentage of lesser Dunedain, mixed-blooded people, simply because the kin strife decimated the purebloods and the pure-blooded Dunedain, and a lot of Northmen came and mixed in. And as well as it's a cosmopolitan city as well, so there would be other peoples in there. Like the men of Lossark were more akin to the Dunlendings, in the sense that they were people of the mountains before the Dunedain, and just mixed in. You got spiritual life, art and architecture, commerce. I'm not going to go through everything here. The inhabitants, you have the royal family. So after the Great Plague, the royal family moves from Osgiliath to Minas Tirith. Before that, they'd be using Minas Tirith as a summer retreat to get away from the heat of Osgiliath. Osgiliath is lower down elevation-wise, and because of the river, you're going to get lots of bugs, as opposed to being high up in the mountains. So it talks about the royal household, the Anorians themselves. It gives a couple of noble houses, which is kind of nice. Some great families and how they started. Fellowships. What I mean by fellowships, kind of like your unions of today. You have the porters and door wardens, hostelers, lamprites, bakers, healers, armorers, stone wrights, wood wrights. You know, you get the idea. Anything you need to keep a city running. Peter Jackson and his team did a fantastic job of designing Minas Tirith in the Return of the King movie. They went to a lot of detail. They had one guy who was a rat catcher, which would be a thing in a city. Modern cities, we have pest control, the Animal Humane Society, things like that. So we get a description of all the various groups. Then we go into stuff I like, the Kingsguard and City Watch. Gives a really good view of what is the King's Watch. So the first company has 2 5-line troops of heavy cavalry, 2 4-line troops of heavy infantry. And the second company, third company, and fourth company. Because you got to remember Baragond, who in the book, who befriended Pippin, he was from the third company of the King's of the Watch. So this one has 1,100 fighting men are keeping an eye on Minas Tirith or Minas Tirith. This is it after the Great Plague. By the War of the Ring, it might have actually been bigger or been the same size. And it has a royal bodyguard, 2 troops of 6 lines each. So a troop would be 20 men. There's 2 troops of 6 lines. So you're looking at about 240 men. And they would be drawn from all over Gondor. The Steward, when the kings were gone, the Steward was around. He probably had his own little bodyguard. And the bodyguard would be considered the Citadel guards up top, watching the tree. They would be considered King's Guard as well. Goes with equipment, city patrols, bureaucracy, the administrators, royal offices. So this is built just like in a medieval city. The office of the bursary, office of estates, office of decrees, office of works, and the haste post. So you got a post office, you got your public works. So in a modern city today, you'd have your sewage company, gas company, telephone company. You know, same idea in a medieval city. You have people doing road work, construction work, sewers, stuff like that. The office of decrees, meaning marriage licenses, divorce decrees, anything that's law. Office of estates would be land holdings or residential holdings. So you want to buy a house, you got to go to the office of estates. The office of the bursary is the treasury. Then you have a wooden towns refugees. So this is the Great Plague era. You have a lot of refugees trying to get into Minas Tirith, and many of them would have came from Osgiliath, which was hit hardest by the plague. Politics and power. You have the royal authority, so the king. the conclave, which would be the city council, and the warden of the keys would be the president of that. The prince presidency. Now the stewards of Gondor did not run Minas Tirith at this time. They were still in the Amethenith, the hills just south of Osgiliath on the Ecthelion side. That would be where the House of Huron was. And it wasn't until the first interim, when King Adonhar and his sons fell in the battle with the Wayne Riders, that you had the House of Huron playing a major role. So you had kings and ruling stewards at the time. Organization of fellowships. So if you want to become a fellow, want to join an organization like the Stonecutters and the Simpsons, or the Masonic Lodge here, you can join one. Secret societies like the Blood Ring, which is mystics and sorcerers. But Tolkien doesn't have any real magic as far as that goes. Order of the Rising Sun, College of the Spoken Word, the Rogues Fellowship, so thieves. There's going to be thieves here too, just not as prevalent. The city plan. Then we go to the outer wall. So the outer or city wall of great height and marvelous thickness, the hard, dark, curving rampart is tall and smooth, unconquerable by steel or fire, so it can't catch on fire. So it's built during the Númenórean period of Gondor. When I say the Númenórean period, it means when the Númenóreans were still, many people had still been born in Númenor, but then came to Gondor. There was a law at the end of the reign of Ar-Pharazôn and the sinking of Númenor. There was many people fled to Gondor. Many of the faithful did. And Isildur and Aryan, they're the ones who started the building of the walls. So the outer wall is baked in fire with granite blocks, so it's black. The inner walls are all white. In the Peter Jackson movies, they're all white. You see them white. The first ring's supposed to be black. It's one of the major differences. It gives a description, a layout of the galleries, firing ports, spiral staircases. It gives a nice cutaway of what the interior wall would look like. It's 100 feet. It also curves. So it'd be hard as hell to get you can see how it curves up. That's to stop siege towers from getting too close. You need like a large portable ramp bridge on top of a siege tower to get to the walls, which is possible. It would have been better if they ditched it on top of that and put Revelines to draw attackers into certain kill zones. Then it goes to the Great Gate. Now this just looks like two barbicans in that picture, but it probably was like this. And certain levels would have. Tolkien did describe the Great Gate in Lord of the Rings. And then you also have the lesser gates, the inner city walls, and they're set up on the sheer face of the cliff of the hill that it's made on. You have lesser gates, the approaches, the watchtowers or ramparts, more layouts of these lesser gates and towers. Going to streets, water supply and sewers. A lot of their water would come from the White Mountains itself. The Witch King would never have been able to stop all water supply into the city had he tried. The water wasn't coming from the Anduin, it was coming from the White Mountains behind. The Witch King couldn't fully besiege Minas Tirith. They could have opened up a mountain trail somewhere to get a supply line. He would have had to take the city level by level. Water supply and sewers, key to some of the sites, and the main streets. So, buildings of note. Goes first into an old guest house, kind of like what Gandalf and Pippin were in. I'm not going to describe a lot of this stuff, just it takes too long. The orrery house, so a great house of someone with wealth. The little lock shop, palace of light, so a lamplighter's house where the key lodge or the warden of the keys lives here. The hall of wax, so you get candle makers. The great bakery. House of Harnaston, so one of the major lords of the city. A lot of this Tolkien describes briefly. When Pippin walks up the city, he sees the great houses that are empty and are half filled. About a third of the city is empty by the time of War of the Ring. It's got a studio for an artist, Eldakar's breakfast house, the Woodwright's house. That's just the second level. On the third level, you got the mortar hall, so the where they make mortar for the buildings. The House of Memorials, where you make for the dead. The chimneys, chimney sweepers, important job. House of Gold and Silver, so metal, precious metals. Great Hall of the Guard. That's a pretty cool design. Jerry the Sharp, so he's a weapons guy, weapons maker. His little workshop. Miles Vitrin, so a sage. Okay, that looks really that's a weird design. Looks like a glass bubble. Office of Estates, so again, like your town hall. Water Rights Hall, so keep the water supply going. Halls of Learning, the Rin Theneth, so like a library or a university, college, whatever you want to call it. The Glassworks. 5th level's got the Bookbinder, Aladdin. You have the Die Makers. Rin Pranath Gwen, the Hall of Books, so again, this would be like a library. Rin Pranath, the Old Halls of Books. College of the Spoken Word. So Gandalf would have went here to look for, when he was looking for Isildur's last scroll. House of Tapestries. On the 6th level, you have the Houses of Healing. The Ratter. Terembrel the Ratter, so they have their own rat catcher here in the 6th level. Just like they did in the Peter Jackson movies, they put a rat catcher. Would be a common thing in a cities. Chamber of the Conclave, so the council halls. House of the Ringing Sound, so the Marathon, the Hall of Feasts. Kind of like your banquet hall. The Fen Hallow and Rathdinnen and the Hallows, so the City of the Dead. And of course, the royal family has their own. A lower barracks. Now the 7th level in the Citadel Rock. So you have the High Court, the Tower of Ecthelion, the White Tower, which was rebuilt from a previous tower. Used to be the Hall of Isildur, the place of the fountain. So I like all these descriptions. The High Hall, or the House of Anarion at one time. The Tower of Anarion. And the Hall of the Palantir is also in the Hall of Anarion. So a lot of descriptions for all 7 levels. Then it gives the city, and other times it talks about the Kinstrife, which is a major thing. Minas Tirith at first supported Castamere over the rightful King Eldacar, but then later switched sides because Castamere was such an ass. Then we got the War of the Ring, and then the Fourth Age, which would be the time of rebirth for Minas Tirith. They would probably go back to being Minas Anar. People of note, you have the royal family, so they're talking about King Tarandor, the 1636 after the Great Plague. And then this is the timeline they're using. Royalty who shaped the city. Denethor's family. And we have courtiers. So you have a king's treasurer, king's herald, proclaimer, court chamberlain. Keep going on like that. The city's nobility at the time. Powerful Anorians. And whoever's leading the fellowships at the time, noted fellowship members. Adventurers. Now this is where not really doing a lot. Nothing really happens in Minas Tirith. There'd be a spy from Umbar. You go through that adventure. Try and find the spy. There would be spies from Umbar, various places in Herod, as well as the east. Sauron would definitely have his own spies in this place. Rye and Wooden Town, so the refugee camp. And it gives a description of what the refugee camp would look like after the Great Plague. It'd be the task for the king to try and resettle these people, preferably in Osgiliath, but who knows. The Secret Ring, which would be a dark cult within the city. The Haunted House, which talks about it's a ghost story with a talisman. I never played any of these adventures at the time. Light fingers and lockpicks, so this is the thieves that go inside. Has a vampire even in this one, which is really not something that would happen. Adapting this module, you have tables of lesser NPCs, royal NPCs, War of the Ring people, adventure NPC tables. So we have the master military table, which I always like. You have the city guard, which is those 1,100 men, plus the King's Guard. You have city patrols, which are like militiamen, or your basic constables or police. Then the Royal Army in Pelennor, so there would be a small army in the Pelennor. It could be anywhere from 700 men to 4,900 men, depending how many Lord Captains you want out there. And it gives a description. It doesn't give real numbers, unfortunately. You have craftsmen, city residents, master and counter table, which is always good to have. Terminology, abbreviations, and then that's it. Selected readings, credits. Alright, so that was my look at Minas Tirith. I thought this book was great. It had a lot of layouts, a lot of diagrams, a lot of people. You can do a lot with this book. Unfortunately, I never really played in it. Did any adventure campaigns in it. Just never got to that point. It's a little hard with Minas Tirith because Minas Tirith is, well, it's not a backwater city. It's the main city, and there's not really a lot of adventuring you can do. Other than spy missions and probably like thieves guilds and stuff like that. There's not really a lot. It's not an open city like Tharbad or say Umbar or the ones they had in Far Herod and Greater Herod. It's just not the same type of atmosphere. But the diagrams were good, the layouts were good, the little maps they gave were good, except for the big map that didn't connect, which really sucked, the regional map. So they could have did more that way. But as far as layouts go, you can use them anywhere, any place, anytime. I think I did use a few of these layouts in this book somewhere else. I wish they'd gone more into the military structure, but what can you do? But overall, this was a great book. A great introduction to cities of Middle-earth. All you Lord of the Rings fans, let me know what you guys think. If anyone played Middle-earth role-playing, did you have this book? Were you able to use it? Did you play it? What'd you think? Let me know in the comments section. If you're new to the channel, subscribe. And until next time, I am Roman Daisel. I am out of here.
Shadows